The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Manfromleng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are continuing with our look at the player cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion for the benefit of new players. This is part 4 of our look at the Survivor cards. We are going to discuss Survival Instinct Level 2, Aquinnah Level 3, Scrapper Level 3, and Try and Try Again Level 3. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Just a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or are good in one particular deck get a Bless token, while cards that we believe are destined to end up on the list of taboos or are bad for the game get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these player card reviews. If you'd like to support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. Special thanks to Cole Monroe Chitty for the amazing art that graces the channel, Nicole Fiscus for the new Whisper in Darkness logo that I use for the podcast, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for the intro as well as the overlays. Thank you very much. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to our reviews of the player cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion for the benefit of new players. This is part 4 of our look at the Survivor cards. We're going to start off with a skill. This is Survival Instinct Level 2. 2 agility skill icons, innate and developed trait. If this test is successful during an evasion attempt, the evading investigator may immediately evade each other enemy engaged with him or her and may move to a connecting location. The level 0 version let you disengage from the enemies but not evade them. So if you happen to have hunters, they were going to chase you, but the amount of action advantage that this card can generate is pretty good, and it has 2 agility skill icons to boot. What do you guys think about this one?
Yeah, I think this card's pretty good. Even the floor of this card is still pretty good. Evade an enemy and move. That is a good effect in and of itself. The fact that it has 2 icons is really nice. But in addition, you can also evade every other enemy at the location. That is pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah, compare this to Cunning Distraction from the core. Like, this kind of does a similar effect, but at 0 cost, and it's pretty nice. Yeah, in fact, this is one of the few cards that I would even suggest upgrading manual dexterity into, because I think just the move alone is quite worth it, and the fact that this could bail you out of situations that will just end the game, because that's often how you can like lose the game in like solo and 2-player, am I right, where like you just get swarmed by enemies and you can't deal with them all. So Survival Instinct is, got your back. Yeah,
especially in those evasion type decks where you're not permanently dealing with the enemies. Like having Survival Instinct in your back pocket can quite literally save your life.
Yeah, this card's pretty good.
Yeah, we've mentioned the level 0 version of Survival Instinct as well as this version in a couple of other reviews of cards that try to do something similar but end up costing you actions and resources to play, when you can upgrade to this and basically do the same thing without having to take actions and spend resources. The obvious target for this is Wendy, because she does do you can build a dodge tank Wendy. Agnes also could make pretty good use of this if you're playing evasion Agnes. Even Ashcan could get some use out of this if he happens to encounter too many enemies for Duke to handle. This gets you out of that situation, and yeah, I don't really have much bad things to say about it. I mean, the one difference I should note between this card and the level 0 card is the level 0 card disengages, so it doesn't work with cards like pickpocketing, which could draw you a card off the evasion. This one does, so it improves the synergy with some of the other cards in the card pool. How would we rate this one?
I think this one's almost Elder Sign territory, but I'm gonna land on +1 because there are times where sometimes you just draw that auto fail and you're sort of relying on this card to do its job, and then yikes.
Yeah.
But barring those circumstances, this is a really nice upgrade for a lot of investigators that can take it.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd also give this a +1. The fact that it's provides 2 to your evade test and just bails you out. I also really appreciate that when you are getting swarmed, you can pick the lowest evade enemy engaged with you, evade that, and evade everything. Level 0 Survival Instinct doesn't quite do that for you, because if you're using level 0 Survival Instinct, you kind of need to evade a hunter in order to really, get you out of trouble. But this, you can just take the lowest evade thing and end up evading everything, which kind of almost like, it's almost kind of like boosting that evade test by another 1 or 2 even. Yeah, because you get to pick your difficulty. Yeah, this is a +1. This is really good.
Yeah, and many enemies tend to have slightly lower evade values than they do fight values, so you're going to get a little bit of an extra boost by being able to pick the easiest enemy to evade. That will make evading, it doesn't matter if there's an enemy that has 6 evade at your location. As long as there is one with 2, you're good to go. I'd give this one a +1 as well. It's very solid. Not really much wrong with it. I mean, you get to evade one enemy, then you get to evade the rest, and you get a move on top of that. Like, this is the card you should be playing instead of bait and switch and fire extinguisher and all those other cards that have evasion like effects on them. This is a much better answer for many an investigator. That brings us to Aquinnah level 3, 4-cost asset with a willpower and agility skill icon ally trait. As a response, when an enemy attacks you, exhaust Aquinnah and deal 1 horror to her. Deal that enemy's damage to an enemy at your location, or to any enemy at your location instead. You still take the horror dealt by this attack. She has 1 health and 4 sanity and takes up an ally slot. Aquinnah level 3 was originally released back in the Lost in Time and Space Mythos pack, and has since been reprinted in the revised core. We did talk about her during our review of the revised core. I think the biggest change between that set and this set is the release of Peter Sylvester. Both the level 0 version and the level 2 version basically relegates Aquinnah to the binder, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, just play Peter instead. He's just gonna do everything for you. He's gonna make you breakfast. He's gonna drive you to your night class. He's gonna pick you up from work. He's even gonna bring you McDonald's when you're like hungry at like 11:30 at night. Peter Sylvester is your boyfriend.
He's got those chicken tendies for you, so you're good. Yeah, it's even like just within revised core, she wasn't that great. Like the ally choices, I think we've mentioned multiple times, just aren't great for survivors. And now that Peter Sylvester is here, really, I think just sort of exemplifies how not great all the other allies are.
Yeah. She's even more XP than Peter Sylvester level 2. It's like, oh.
And costs more resources.
Oh.
And deals you horror.
Yeah.
Whereas Peter heals you horror.
Yeah.
It's like Peter is a combo piece and just a really good stat boost, whereas Aquinnah is like a combo piece that you really need to build around, and it just never really works out because of like the way you have to situate the board to get her ability to actually do anything.
Yeah, especially with the 2 investigators that can take her, Ashcan Pete and Wendy. This is conditional on them being attacked, and
yeah, that's true.
Neither of them really like that. So I don't see many Ashcan Pete or Wendy decks for that matter that are courting attacks from enemies, or baiting attacks from enemies, so Aquinnah can do her job. I will say in her defense that you can eventually build a deck around her once your card pool expands. I have seen William York was released in the Path to Carcosa Investigator Expansion. He's much tankier than the investigators that are available in Dunwich and the revised core, and can probably build a deck around her. There is also Daniela down the road in the Edge of the Earth, who likes being attacked, and so Aquinnah, I could see her having a place there. But yeah, in revised core in Dunwich, poor Aquinnah simply gets displaced. I'm going to give her an auto fail, unfortunately. I just don't think she has a role at this stage. She might, I think you know, as your card pool expands, she, again, much like Rise to the Occasion, she could get a bless. But, yeah, right now she's pretty inconsequential.
I'd say auto fail even when your card pool expands, because you're still sacrificing the willpower boost in particular on Peter Sylvester in order to play Aquinnah in the ally slot, and you get to pay more XP and you get to pay more cost for a more niche effect. Yeah, this is an auto fail.
Yeah, and even someone like Yorick has like access to B-Cops and all the nice Guardian allies. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like you really would have to build your deck on using Aquinnah and having the enemies at your location, and that's just way too much work. Just kill them dead first.
Yeah, unfortunately, Aquinnah is just a casualty of better allies being released. And you can try to build a deck around her as your card pool expands. I certainly haven't been tempted to do so. I know there are decks over on Arkham DB that include Aquinnah, but I have not built one myself, nor have I been really that tempted to play one. So unfortunately, Aquinnah is spending a lot of time in the box. That brings us to Scrapper, the permanent that was released in the Blood on the Altar Mythos pack with all the other permanents. 3 cost or 3 XP asset permanent talent. As a free triggered ability, you can spend a resource, you get +1 combat for this skill test, or as a free triggered ability, spend 1 resource, you get +1 agility for this skill test. This one was added to the list of taboos along with Streetwise and Higher Education. They only added 1 XP to this one, unlike some of the others. What do you guys think about this one?
I like this card quite a bit.
Yeah.
There are a good amount of investigators that can use this pretty well, and being able to boost both of your combat stats is pretty nice, honestly. Like, it seems sort of counterintuitive, I think, initially when you're planning your deck out, but as you play the game, and certainly when you expand your card pool and you get an investigator like Silas, for instance, really likes this card. There are plenty of investigators that do kind of a bit of both. In terms of enemy management, like Rita can kind of sometimes evade things and then punch them when she needs to, and even someone like Ashcan Pete can sometimes, like when he's fighting with Duke, he can spend a couple resources to boost Duke's attack, and then he can evade other things that maybe are just too tanky or something along those lines. Like it's a pretty nice upgrade. I've always been kind of confused about why they added 1 XP to it. What does adding 1 XP do? Anyway,
taboo, and now you have to be like, ooh, I'm putting a taboo card.
I guess it does make it a bit more
Ooh.
edgy. Ooh, yeah, spooky.
Yeah. So one thing I actually really like about Scrapper is how it synergizes with Dark Horse. Because, so with Dark Horse, you know, it turns off if you have any resources in your pool. So what that means is that if you have ways in your deck of dumping resources for an effect, you can then turn on the Dark Horse whenever you want. And Scrapper is a good way of doing that, because you can be like, you end the turn, you end up engaged with something, then you take the resource from Dark Horse, you know, you go into Mythos phase, and then just whenever you make an attack or a agility test, spend it on Scrapper, get the boost from Scrapper, and then turn on Dark Horse to get another boost, and then you're sitting pretty, right? You're doing great at that point. So I think Scrapper's great because like it synergizes with other cards in this box. attacks.
Yeah, I was also kind of surprised they added an XP to this one. Maybe just because of the permanent. I mean, they sort of recognized that all the permanents were a little OP, at least the 3 main ones. And so this one sort of, they added an XP because just, having a permanent boost on the table all the time is so good that it warranted an extra XP. I don't necessarily think it's because it adds combat and agility. I mean, we've already got Hard Knocks that basically does the same thing. It's just not a permanent. So maybe it's the permanent part that they added the XP for. Yeah, this is very nice. It does seem counterintuitive to add both combat and agility, but one of the problems, especially if you play Guardians do like to kill everything, but occasionally you run into that situation where they actually want to evade something instead because it's just not efficient to kill it. And unfortunately for Guardians, most of them have very low agility and don't really have an easy way to boost it. Not so for a survivor with Scrapper. If Ashcan Pete needs to kill somebody with Duke or Fire Axe, he can do so. This, like you said, Mattastrophic will turn on Dark Horse to give even more boosts. But if you do end up in that situation where retreat is the better option, you can pitch some resources to this to get that evade that you need. So it works. Wendy can also get some value out of this because her combat is awful and her agility is pretty good. So if you do need to kill a rats, say, she can throw a couple resources at this, kill the rats, and then against everything else, she can lock them down and evade them while the rest of the group carries about their business. There is a level 0 version in the Stella Clark starter deck that loses the permanent keyword, so you have to play it the old-fashioned way. How would we rate this one?
I think this is a very solid +1. Man, permanent has to be the best keyword in the game, if not the second best, under fast. I mean, permanent is so good.
Yes, it kind of is. Yeah, I'd say +1 as well. Not every deck is going to want to take this, and you are spending it 3 XP for something that doesn't actually do anything until you spend more resources on it. So yeah, I'd still say it's a +1. I'm also starting to think that one of the downsides of Scrapper is, in order to get a lot of use out of it, you gotta have a way of generating a bunch of resources, which at this point, Ashcan and Wendy don't really have ways of getting a lot of resources to really leverage Scrapper. In fact, they want to. I mean, thanks to Dark Horse, you probably want to spend down your resources. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's a good point. We don't have Man on LeBranch yet.
Yeah. So this isn't like because I remember we rated Streetwise very, very highly in Rogue because Rogues already have good ways to get lots of resources. Not so for Survivor, so they're not going to be able to leverage Scrapper as well. But still, it's pretty good, and I'd give it a +1.
I'm going to knock it down to a 0 simply because I think this is a very good card, but not necessarily right now. Like you said, the resources are a bit of a problem. We don't have Madame Lebranche. We don't have Take Heart. We don't have a lot of the ways that survivors rely on getting resources. I mean, you can play emergency cash as one way, but I mean, permanent, that's a great keyword. The ability to start with this on the table, very nice. But yeah, I think the resource game could be a little tight at this point, especially if you are leaning into Dark Horse. You've got Fire Axe that sort of covers the whole combat side of it. So really, you're looking at this, especially like say if you're playing Ashcan and Fire Axe and Duke, you're probably using Duke to kill for one attack, Fire Axe to finish it off. The evasion or the agility boost is nice to have, but not necessarily needed. I have bought this for my Ashcan Pete decks, and I have been happy to have it, but it's one of those upgrades that I don't necessarily pick up right away. That brings us to the final survivor card in the box. This is Try and Try Again. It's a 2-cost asset that costs 3 XP, 2 willpower skill icons, talent. As a response, after a skill test is failed, if a skill card you own is committed to that test, exhaust, try and try again. Return that skill card to your hand. What do you guys think about this one?
I quite like this card. It's a little slow in the way that it recurs cards. You have to fail skill tests, which is consuming actions, and then you have to commit skill cards. So, like, you're not really getting card advantage, but you're not losing cards, which is a really nice effect to have on skill cards like Perception and Guts and things like that. Being able to commit those later and get that card draw can be pretty nice. 3 XP and 2 resources means that you have to kind of invest not only time but experience into like actually planning on using this thing. And well, thankfully this is sort of in lines with what Dark Horse wants to do. I think play a bunch of skills and being able to recur them over and over again is really nice so that you don't run out of gas. I think it's pretty good. It's nice that it costs 2 because you can play Dark Horse, play this, and now you've got this kind of little engine going.
It's true, on turn 1.
So I have to ask, because I think anyone that looks at this card and perhaps has the Stella Clark starter deck is going to think that this will work with Take Heart. So I think we'd be remiss to not mention the interaction.
This does not work with Take Heart or Stella Clark's signature skill, neither Rain nor Snow, because they trigger in different steps of the skill test resolution.
No, I wanted to mention that because I don't think that's entirely clear unless you really delve into the game's rules reference. You know, like when you first read it, you're like, "Oh, I failed the skill test. Oh, I failed the skill test. Cool combo," but it does not work that way.
No, because the card's already back in your hand and its effect isn't there, like isn't on the table, quote unquote. To
yeah, this card will bounce either Take Heart or neither Rain nor Snow back to your hand before it has a chance to resolve in the following steps. So unfortunately that combo does not work.
Okay, so the thing about this card is that, okay, so it's 3 XP and 2 resources, and it doesn't actually do anything until someone fails a skill test. I do like how you can use this on your friends. If they fail a skill test, you tried to help them, you could be like, okay, fine, try and try again. You know, you can do it. Yeah, so I do kind of appreciate that, but 3 XP is kind of steep for having to like wait for things to go bad for it to come into play. But then again, I think you're right, Nate. If you want to run a very like light asset, light asset deck where you have like 12, 14 skill cards, I think this actually works out pretty well because, you know, it really sucks when you throw some skill cards into a test and you fail it, and then you go, well, I got to try it again, but I just burned my overpower. So this will definitely help you there.
Yeah, and it combos nicely with deduction and other skills like that too that have some other sort of supplementary effect. I mean,
yeah.
I think this is a pretty suitable upgrade. You know, if you're not looking into Scrapper or something like that, then maybe this is something you're looking at.
Yeah, I can't help but think, even though it's like forbidden on the list of taboos, how funny this can be with Double or Nothing. It's like you bet everything, you go for the gold, and then you fail. And then, well, at least I'll try to bet everything again later.
Or use it on All or Nothing or something like that. If
yeah, exactly.
Some card pool allowed you to do that, yeah, that'd be funny.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's bad, but I wouldn't say it's like incredible either.
Yeah, it's not. I feel like it's one of those cards that you don't really rely on it, but it's nice to have because it can kind of not necessarily win you the game, but it keeps you in the game for longer so that you can let your other cards win you the game.
I've never purchased this card. I think it's one of these cards that looks really good on paper, and I don't think there is really any worse feeling in this game than committing your, say, perception to the skill test that you need to pass, drawing the auto fail, and getting nothing for your perception. Often it's not necessarily the icons that are the worst part. It's just like the fact you don't get to draw a card to replace your perception either.
Okay.
That's a pretty rotten feeling, and this card solves that problem. I've just sort of don't really need this card. I don't want to pay the resources or XP for it for the number of times that it would come in handy. I have seen players make a case for this in Harder Expert, where the Chaos Bag is a lot swingier, and committing a skill card isn't necessarily the slam dunk that it is in, say, Standard, where if you can go 2 up before the pull, you're in a pretty good spot. You know, you might draw a -4 or a tentacle and fail the odd skill test, but generally you should be passing. That's not the case in Harder Expert. So committing, you know, especially a card like Deduction or Vicious Blow or something like that, where you really need that extra clue or you really need that extra damage, this could come in handy. I think the biggest problem with this card is the fact that a level 1 version of this card was released in the Boundary Beyond Mythos pack that will be eventually re-released in the Forgotten Age Investigator Expansion whenever that is comes down the road. It's basically the same card, except it only has 3 charges, which is basically probably how often you're going to use this card in a game. So paying 3 XP for this version for unlimited uses doesn't seem as necessary. Like, I like the 1 XP version a lot more, just because I'm paying 1 XP. I'm getting an effect that's pretty helpful, but not necessarily going to need it all that often. If I need it more than 3 times per game, the game has probably gone down the toilet anyway at that point. So
yeah.
But yeah, this is one of those cards that looks really good on paper to me, and then I've just never needed it.
Well, in my case, it's because I just never seem to have 3 XP at the time. When I look and I say, "Oh, that looks good," oh, but I don't have 3 XP. That's
now, if
yeah.
I was somebody like Nate who drew an exorbitant number of auto fails, this card obviously looks pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, even still, you're generally right. Like, especially in lower player counts, you're often only taking like 1, maybe 2 skills per turn, barring the like couple final turns of the game. So like, yeah, you're really not triggering this a lot per se, but I do think that perhaps in Dark Horse, where you're sort of relying more on skills and cards that don't cost any experience, like being able to at least recur something and kind of keep your engine going is nice, because you really just don't have a lot else to spend that experience on.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not buying Scrapper, you know, maybe you're looking at Flare, maybe you're looking at Stroke of Luck or Survival Instinct. Obviously, you're looking at Peter Sylvester. You know, like, you've got the experience, and I think like having one of these in your deck, you happen to draw it in your opening hand, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm envisioning a deck where you have very few assets, like 8 in the deck, and you have like 14 skill cards. Okay, I can see this being pretty good in something like that, where you're committing a skill card to like most, if not all, of your tests and a decent amount of your friends' tests.
Yeah.
Because that's more opportunities for failure, you know, if you're committing to friends' tests as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see it working there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that deck, at least within this card pool, is probably Ashcan Pete, because I don't think he really needs a lot other than Duke to get going. You know, you don't really need something like Mag Glass, but it's certainly helpful. You don't really need stuff like that, but the skills are always pretty generally useful, and Deduction is really handy with Duke, because you can move into a location, grab 2 clues. You have Try and Try Again to make sure it essentially goes off, which is kind of helpful. So I think there is a build where this card is generally useful, and I think it's costed just right resource-wise, but...
I'm curious to find out how you guys would compare this to Rabbit's Foot from the revised core, which basically this gives you your skill back while Rabbit's Foot gives you another card.
I think generally Rabbit's Foot is probably easier to trigger, but Try and Try Again is probably a better card because you know exactly what you're getting. And skill cards, I think, are among some of the better cards in the game. Just
Okay.
because of the level of consistency they add to your deck.
Yeah, plus there's the accessory slot issue.
Yes, that too.
With the...
Yeah, that's true. This does not
Yeah.
require one of those few assets in the game that doesn't require a slot, so you're not running afoul of that slot conflict.
Also, you can run both, and getting 2 cards is better than getting 1 card on a failure.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
I like I'm suddenly enjoying the synergy with look what I found, where it's like you're continuing to fail forward.
How would we rate this one?
I think I'm going to land on a Bless token. I think this is a cool card to build around. And I think there is enough in this card pool to let you do that. I think between the neutral skills, maybe deduction if you're playing Ashcan Pete, or, something like Vicious Blow with Duke, I think that could be pretty good. You've got the slots, maybe you play like 2 Vicious Blow, 2 deduction, and some other slot. Some other good skill, and now you have this like kind of suite of skills that you can recur with try and try again.
Yeah, I was gonna say 0 because 3XP is kind of a lot for something that only works on a failure. But I think you're right. I think you can lean into this, especially since we were talking about survival instinct. Because, oh man, failing your survival instinct evasion feels horrible.
Yes. And then
So,
you
like,
have Stroke of Luck as well. Like, you've got all these things kind of like working in your favor. I think it's there. And especially with Dark Horse, like you're kind of boosting yourself up with Dark Horse, and then you've got this to kind of bounce your skills back into your hand. Maybe you've also got Rabbit's Foot, and now you're like drawing tons of cards off of your failures, and that feels pretty good, actually, I think.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah, I'm starting to like this actually. Yeah, let's go for that Bless token. Let's make it happen.
I'm going to give this an Elder Thing. I don't like this card. I don't like how I would feel if I drew this card, because I'm going to have to pay 2 resources for something that may or may not happen. Yeah, I really hate that feeling when I blow a skill test with my only perception in my hand, and I'm like, man, I wish I could have that back. But I've been playing enough that I've survived. I've moved on. I've won games even though I've lost my perception to a bad skill test, so this just sort of feels unnecessary a lot of the time. But I can see where you're coming from. I can see, I mean, it is part of the whole survivor theme of failing forward. I just feel like this is one of those that I just don't know how often I would trigger it. I guess the 2 willpower skill icons are nice. If I did draw it late and wasn't like, I don't really want to play this at this point, at least it's got 2 matching skill icons. But yeah, this is not a card that I reach for.
I think like the way you play this card, I think, is more like you're playing Ashcan Pete and you're using cards to reuse Duke, and you have this as a way to kind of recur cards so that you can keep discarding to keep using Duke over and over again. So like you've got like Rabbit's Foot plus this, and maybe you just kind of take the random investigate and you either grab the clue or you draw a couple cards and kind of keep your engine going. So I think this is more like a card that sort of facilitates a style of play rather than it being sort of this like crux of a strategy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm starting to think so because, like I had mentioned earlier, I really like, and this doesn't work with the Rabbit's Foot, being able to use this on your friends, because if you have a ton of skill cards in your deck and you're committing them to your friends' tests, that is more opportunities for a failure to happen and for you to use try and try again for the turn.
Yeah, and what's nice is that the neutral skills all kind of like synergize with each other since they all draw cards. Like you can kind of draw and like snowball them, which is cool.
Yeah, especially if you're playing either Wendy or Ashcan Pete, because both of them, their abilities require you to discard cards. So any way to get more cards in your hand is pretty good for both of them. Yeah, keep that momentum going.
That's going to do it for our look at the Survivor cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion. Let us know in the comments down below what you think of the Survivor cards that were released in this expansion. What do you guys think about the Survivor cards as a whole?
Man, they've got some really good cards here, and then they've got some real stinkers.
You're right.
It is a roller coaster with the Survivor card pool. But, I mean, I think this really kind of lays down a lot of the groundwork that we'll see kind of developed over the course of the next few sets. You know, we've got this sort of like failing forward archetype with try and try again and oops and all these other things. And then we've got Peter Sylvester, who's like, he's the homeboy, easily kind of the best ally in the game, I think.
Pretty much,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, and then Fire Axe and Dark Horse, I mean, those are great cards and continue to be great.
Yeah, and I'm really glad Dark Horse is in this box because it's like a playstyle all to itself. I think Dark Horse is one of the coolest cards in the game because it's like you look at it and go like, okay, I'm gonna make a Dark Horse deck, you know?
Yeah,
I think
Dark Horse is great for that reason. Like I think it gives newer players an easy focal point to kind of like direct some of their initial deck building around. And kind of like teach them how the game works. And I really like cards that do that, to kind of teach you how the game works by playing them.
Yeah. And I also like how it looks like we have a couple cards in the Survivor pool, mainly Survival Instincts, but also things like Flare that like bail, and also Try and Try Again to a lesser extent, which like just bail you out of bad situations. You know, and then you've got like Stroke of Luck, same thing. It bails you out of a bad situation by letting you pass a skill test you had no business taking, you know. Yeah, so we've got like the fail forward, but we've also got the pulling it out of the fire, you know, and then we've got, so that's like thematic right there, right? Yeah. You survive.
It is interesting to compare the Survivor card pool to the Mystic one, where Mystic sort of got a smattering of a whole bunch of stuff that never really coalesced into a deck. The Survivors get a very clear path here with Dark Horse. I would have been really curious back in the day had Aquinnah level 3 been replaced in the this cycle by Madame Lebranche. I wonder how whether Dark Horse would have just become too good at that point, because that solves their ally problem as well and gives them a resource and a card. Like Madame Lebranche is such sort of a linchpin to Dark Horse decks because she can give you a resource if you don't have one, and a card if you don't have one, as a free triggered ability, no less, that it might have just pushed the Dark Horse build over the top at this point of the game.
I think it would have actually been at the point where like anybody who could take the Dark Horse Lebranche combo might have actually done it. I'm talking like Jenny and Jim and Rex and Zoe. Like everyone who could might have actually gone for it. If that were the case. Yeah.
Because I can't think of many other cards that Dark Horse is missing besides her. Sort of they get everything in this package. So yeah, it is a roller coaster, like you said, Nate. The first bunch of Survivor cards were a real powerhouse, and then after that, sort of a lot of niche effects, some just outright bad effects. But I think over the course of the card game, you know, Survivor, I think, gets a lot more good cards than bad cards overall, and I think we see that here. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.